Killed the radio star of the late 70s. Today we discuss the impact that TV has had on radio and why it still remains a popular choice of today. You're watching Media and Money. I'm Jackie Nell. We're talking radio today, and joining me is radio and television personality Jeremy Mansfield, Independent radio analyst Lance Rothschild, and Executive Director of Broadcasting at Kagiso Media Omar Essack. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. So, of course, we know video didn't really kill the radio star, if it would ever, like they predicted in the song. But, of course, TV did have some kind of impact on radio, Omar. Can you give us a snapshot of how far radio has actually come?
Well, pretty much, as you're aware, before television, radio did the soapies, right? There were soap operas.
Stories,
absolutely, all of that was happening on radio. The moment television started to do that and everybody migrated to TV, radio evolved.
Yeah.
Innovated, changed. Format music became part of a lot of what radio had, but also talk. A lot of talk radio initially, certainly in the United States I'm talking about, which is where a lot of that evolution happened. And then when video hits started to come in, radio had these different formats segmenting even tighter and tighter, niche formats emerging. There's no way that MTV or VH1 could replicate that. So every time there's been a challenge, radio's always come up with a new way of delivering to the market segment, to the customers, to the listeners. And currently the challenge is, of course, there's a whole lot of music sites, Last.fm, Spotify, all of these that offer music on demand to people when they want to receive it.
And we're going to talk about it a little bit later,
again,
about
radio
whether it's a threat or an opportunity and digital and how you stay relevant. But I just want to go back to why radio is still so popular. And what is it that listeners want? Is it entertainment? Is it content? Is it personalities?
It's a whole mix. It's a mix of everything that radio brings, and it brings it in such a nice way if it's done well. You know, radio still reaches huge numbers. It's portable. You can't take your TV. You can't. Hopefully, you don't drive and watch TV. But
some people do. But yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so there's a bit of passivity to it, but it's also even within that passivity, it includes the listener. You actually feel part of your station.
So what are you saying? Is it it's a bit of both, a bit of everything?
It's a bit of everything. It's entertainment, it's information, it's personality, it's fun, it's a little bit of light relief, it's involvement. It is everything. It brings you in. It's
Jeremy, you're nodding your head. You're agreeing with what Lance is saying.
I'm agreeing to a certain extent. I also disagree to a certain extent because I think that there's a huge amount of emphasis being placed on this thing called content. But I think that if you're looking at the listener and the person you're trying to attract to a radio station, the emphasis in content is at the wrong part of that word, because it's not content, it's actually making them content. So we're in this industry, the radio industry. Well, I'm not part of it anymore, but I mean, we've been fascinated, and we've almost been driving this whole thing about content, and we've lost, I think, to a certain extent, making the audience content.
Okay, so what makes the audience content, according to you?
That is getting into the audience's space and understanding who your audience is and appealing to them directly. And that changes in this country. The sense of humour, you guys will agree, the sense of humour in Joburg is different to Cape Town, different to Durban. You can do something on the Highveld that you can't do on East Coast, because it just wouldn't appeal to that Durban audience.
Omar, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think every market segment has, people are different. People at the coast are a little bit more laid back. Perhaps they're not as open to provocation as they might be in Johannesburg. So the things that Jeremy said here and got audiences excited.
Awakenings or whatever.
Yeah, they might have responded differently in Durban. So I think Jeremy's absolutely right, though. It's about finding out what the buttons are that you press with your audience specifically, and that's always. I mean, I think that's always going to be good for radio because it's a local medium and it responds to the local psyche. Which is why when people say, "Hey, the internet is going to bring Kiss FM into your car from Los Angeles with Ryan Seacrest," and that doesn't make me scared. That doesn't terrify me, because Ryan Seacrest appeals to a particular audience segment. In Durban, does he know the psychology of the Durban audience? Can he talk about the things that matter to people in Durban? Of course not.
Now, here's a question. You used to be the boss man of 5FM years ago.
Yeah.
Do you still see a place for national radio?
I don't. To a large degree, I don't, because it loses its flexibility, it loses its chameleonness. Radio is very adaptive, and it also needs to move fast. And what's happening in Johannesburg right now is not necessarily happening in Durban. It might be raining in Joburg, might be a perfect day on the beach in Cape Town.
But how do you overcome that as a national radio station?
Well, one needs to look at how one finesses your content, your program material, because remember that you're speaking very much one-on-one to the audience. So you can't talk about the weather on a national station because you have so many different weather patterns. There are things that are interesting, and radio programming, radio content, there's a very interesting analogy. I always think of radio as a little bit like the fashion industry as well. And so you've got to continually tweak, continually reinvent, but you've also, there's a point at which you also have to stop tweaking. You know, you can be over fine-tuning to the point that you actually lose the connection with your audience.
Before we go any further, the big question, and the viewers want to know, and let's just get it out of the way. Jeremy, why did you leave Highveld?
I'd done my time. I've been in radio for 25 years. I've done what undoubtedly was the most profitable morning show in commercial radio in this country for 13 years. It's time to move on. There are other things that I want to achieve, other things that I want to do there.
And you're leaving at a peak, right?
Yeah, you always got to get up on the top.
I know, it's an interesting point that Jeremy makes, because is there not a risk involved when your personality becomes bigger than the brand? What do you do then? How do you handle big personalities, Omar?
You know, I think there is definitely a risk, but it's also a risk worth taking. Jeremy quite rightly pointed out that it was the most profitable commercial radio show for 13 years. And it was driven by the personality, there's no question. 100%. And I think if Highveld had to do it again, if we had to do it with a similar talent, we would absolutely take the risk, because it's worth it. Because ultimately, you either have wallpaper or you stand out. And I think it goes back to the audience contentedness. When do they get contented? When they're being provoked, when they're made to laugh, when they're really feeling something. There's an emotional connection. Radio with bland music is jukebox. You know, why run a radio station if you can't put real personalities that actually are allowed to be themselves and engage with the audiences? You have to take that risk. I just think Howard Stern, when he left a radio station to go to another, of course there's a risk, but I would rather have a Howard Stern than have somebody who's in the background.
And talk about a Howard Stern, it brings me to the topic of controversy, Lance. And is it something that makes a DJ popular? Necessarily?
It depends. There's the key thing there, of course, is also judgment. But controversy is the coin of talk radio, largely, because you're going to have conflicting opinions, and that's always great. That makes for interesting debate, provided it's well managed. There was the old adage years ago, and I was quoted in an article saying that there are only three people interested in the conversation. That's the caller, the jock, and the caller's wife, husband, or mother. Okay, and sometimes it still can be that way, but it does depend on the anchor, the presenter, to keep it current, to keep it relevant, to keep it exciting. But controversy is fantastic. I mean, you know, it can also help to completely change perceptions and positioning of a brand. Many years ago, 5FM, or before, in fact, it was still in the days of Radio 5, was very strongly perceived as part of the Staatsdienst, to put it, I'm sorry to put it in such harsh terms, but that was exactly, it was part of the establishment. And getting sued by the legal fraternity because of something controversial was probably the best thing for the station positioning, because the perception out there amongst the audience was the SABC will never do something like this. We're talking in the sort of the mid-80s. And that, from a positioning perspective, shifted the station where it did wonders for the value of the brand.
But it could go either way,
Absolutely.
Jeremy.
And you know what? I think that is the scary part from a management point of view. I would hate to be Omar. No, I wouldn't be able to be in that position. I'm not that sort of person. It takes it takes a certain personality type to be able to deal with that, because I would not like to have managed myself. I would not like to manage some of your talent. I started on radio. I was the junior presenter with a certain Darren Scott, who is now on Jacaranda. I know what Darren was like then. I wouldn't like to manage him now. So it does. It takes it takes a lot
That's
of
a risky-
it takes a lot of balls to
it's a
do this
risky
job
business, Omar.
from a management point of view.
Absolutely it is. I mean, but that
you
comes with the
if you don't
territory.
take the risk,
it comes with the territory.
You're just going to be mediocre, aren't you?
100%. And I think Jeremy's right. It's not an easy task, but when you commit to doing radio and trying to do it well, you commit to taking what comes with it, and that's the territory.
This being a visual medium, there's that lovely old adage about me being in management many years ago, and they always used to say I have a face for radio and a voice for management.
And talk about TV, your crossover. You've done some TV work, and what do you prefer, radio or TV?
I've worked in TV since I started with SuperSport in 1989. So I've been in TV for a fair amount of years, and I would absolutely go first choice radio. Because,
Why?
Because, and I don't want to upset anyone on the show, if you're in radio, you've only got yourself to blame and yourself to rely on. Right here, we can be sitting and suddenly my microphone can go and there's no sound, so we have a problem. You've got sound, you've got camera issues, you've got lighting issues, you've got makeup, you've got producers, you've got... I'm not a control freak, but I prefer to know that where I'm going, I will get to the end of the joke and hit the punchline, and not halfway through have somebody go,
It's immediate.
can we do it again? And you've lost the energy.
I'll give you an example, anecdotal. That's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
One of the shows at East Coast Radio, Daryl Ilbury, doing the morning show. The morning show, the traffic guy has a heart attack. Of course, it's all staged, but he has a heart attack. And Daryl takes a hanger. The only thing they can give him is a coat hanger. He's got to carve it through Johan van Bargen's throat to get to his heart so he can breathe. People are listening to this. They hear Johan bump against the desk as he tries to get up because the hanger goes through his throat. This is all being created.
And
people
staged.
love it.
And you
This
can
is
get away with
theatre of
it?
the mind. We've forgotten that we can do all of this magic with sound effects, with the way that people react, with the emotion. You can't do that here.
Yeah.
I couldn't be...
Bring me a hammer. Hanger. Let's see if we can do it, Lance. One word.
What's the craziest thing that ever happened at 5FM?
Oh, there's far too many. But I mean, we once interviewed a dog on air. We had
Oh,
Jock
right.
of the Bushveld. We actually pulled a stunt with that. It was in my early days at 5. And there were rumours. The radio industry thrives on the rumour mill as well. And there were rumours that we had recruited Kevin Savage. So we invited the press to come and meet our savage new Jock. And we had Jock of the Bushveld, the dog, in the studio, and we interviewed him on the Chuckle and Chat show, which was a great stunt. And then, of course, I mean, a lot of the stuff that Jocks create. Tony Blewett had that wonderful character with Louise Sinclair, the Thelma. And that was such fun in the morning. And again, everyone could see it. The thing that I think Omar was trying to say is that the screen in radio is a personal screen. It's a human brain. It's your own brain.
Yeah.
And so you see the images the way you picture them, and they're perfect to you.
We're gonna